It's really difficult to find great executives. Spirit Consulting helps organizations find all-star executives and hire the right one using work psychology so you can serve more customers and grow your business. To get a free quote, go to spiritmco.com. Enjoy the show.
Welcome to the Tips for Team Building podcast, where our mission is to inspire and propel others along in their leadership journeys. I'm your host, Jaden Smith, and so excited to welcome my friend Kyle Kingston as our first ever guest. Kyle, thanks for taking the time. For those who don't know you, the first question we'll start out with is, who are you?
Great question. And, thank you for having me, Jaden. The pleasure is all mine. I'm excited to be here. So, I've been in healthcare leadership for a little over 14 years. I started out as a bedside clinician. And over time, I found myself dabbling and jumping into leading initiatives and committees, which really led to a passion for leadership, which really kind of led my transition to clinical management. Shortly after completing my MHA, I moved into medical group administration, where I oversaw several different medical divisions, worked with a lot of diverse teams for several years. Prior to my current role as Vice President of Operations with Great Expressions, I spent 5 years in the occupational medicine arena, where I was regional director for about 45 locations, and then held a corporate role where I led organizational process implementation, innovation, and technology growth. In February, I started with Great Expressions as the Vice President of Operations for Michigan, and myself and my significant other just relocated to the Detroit area, and we're really enjoying it.
Awesome. And love just the diversity of experience that you have, Kyle, from medical group to occupational health and now dentistry. I know you and I kind of joked about, operations is operations. And you have just been incredibly successful in what you're doing, and know that, the role that you're in right now is, no small role. So kudos to you for having made that transition, and just so excited to see all the successes that you have in that role.
Thank you, Jaden. I appreciate the kind words.
Awesome. Well, so Kyle, you kind of talked through your leadership, journey, and how you've kind of gotten, or I guess like the roles that you've held in that. But I guess like what really inspired you to, because I know from previous conversations that you started in kind of that clinical background before moving into operational leadership. What really kind of inspired you to make that pivot to now, be in the position that you're in today?
Yeah, it's a great question, Jaden. I like being asked that question because it kind of gives some insight into some of the opportunities in our overall healthcare environment. As I said, I started out as a bedside clinician. I was a respiratory therapist, and my original track in school was I wanted to become a doctor. That was what I was going to school for at that time. I was working full-time as a respiratory therapist. I was working at Children's Memorial Hospital in the neonatal intensive care unit. It was really fulfilling, but also really challenging, which can be great and also bad, in its own. What I came to find is that we had a lot of shortfalls and missed opportunities that impacted our patients as well as our providers due to a miscommunication between what the bedside providers really needed and what was actually going on at the bedside, and between the administration. Administrators typically can be very afraid to come to the bedside. They're typically very cautious to come to the bedside and have the tough conversations with the providers to really understand what they need, what's going on, what's working, what's not. And so over time, I really started to kind of realize, I could have an impact here. I understand what's going on at the bedside. I have a passion for leadership. I see what needs to be done. And so I pivoted. I pivoted to healthcare administration. That was a crucial decision for me because, I have been able to have that impact that I wanted to, of knowing that bedside, knowing what goes on there, knowing what goes on with the patient, and understanding how the decisions that I make as a healthcare leader impacts that, and knowing how crucial it is to get that feedback and to work closely with those bedside providers, because ultimately they're the ones who make the business happen. They're the ones who make the patient care happen. And so it's extremely crucial that we understand their needs, and we understand how it's working for them whenever we're driving initiatives or whenever we're setting goals. So that was really the driver for me, is being able to have more of an impact, being able to really connect the bridge between the two of, the bedside and the administrator, so that we weren't missing those opportunities, so we weren't failing the patient when we could be, doing much better for them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that just provides so much more insight. You hear, a lot of times of people being placed in leadership positions that don't really know what they're leading, and that's why it's so important to like be in the field to like get a grasp of it. And you have that experience like firsthand from being in that type of role, which I think just makes you that much stronger of a leader. So, thanks for your response there. And so just kind of want to pivot into some of the impact that you're having. And, in preparing for this episode, you mentioned that you wanted to discuss a book, which was Daniel Coyle's The Culture Code. And for those who don't know, I didn't know. I did a quick Google search to find out before, so I need to add that one to my reading list. But this book explores some of the world's most successful organizations, such as Pixar, the San Antonio Spurs, and the U.S. Navy SEALs Team 6, and kind of revealing what makes them tick. Want to kind of hear, I guess, what were your learnings from this book, Kyle, and why do you recommend it to our audience?
I learned a lot from this book, and it's been a long time since I've read it, but I carry a lot of really the three skills that he touches on is what I try to carry with me when I go into any role or any situation when I'm working with a team. Because we're not wired to necessarily work with other people all the time. We're diverse. We all have our own backgrounds. We all have our own thoughts on how things should be done. We all have our own pride. We all have our own fears. We're all vulnerable. And so it's really important that we understand how to translate that from our own perspective and try to understand the individuals you're working with, because that's really what builds a great team. And so, the three skills really that he touches on is, build a safe environment to make everybody feel comfortable working together. I can tell you that, Jaden, I have been in environments where it's not necessarily encouraged to share your feedback. It's not necessarily encouraged to provide the why. Can sometimes have very strong individuals in a group who push their initiative, especially it's bad in the situation where that's the leader of the group. And what it does is it makes people pull back. And when people pull back, you lose some potentially really great ideas to push that team forward. So that's the first skill, especially of a leader when you're leading a team. The second is to show your vulnerability, to again show that nobody has to be perfect. It's okay to make a mistake. It's all right to throw an idea out there and maybe it's not the right idea. It's okay. That's fine. It's how you respond to it is what matters. It's how you adjust and learn from that is what matters. Nobody's perfect. I'm not perfect. I have learned more from my failures than I have from my successes. And it's important that people know that I'm human, because if people just think I'm just, this hard-line, hard-nosed, robotic leader who doesn't think I can ever screw up, I'm never going to see the true potential of my team, because they're going to be too scared to show it because they're afraid they're going to mess up. And that needs to be taken out of the equation early on. And then, the third is really, kind of establishing that common goal and establishing the path to get there. What we see too often in organizations and in mid-level leaders or mid-level executive leaders is, they translate the initiatives or the goals of the organization to their teams as, okay, we're being told to do this, so this is what leadership wants. As a leader in that position, you are both an advocate and a translator for the organization as well as your team. So it is your job to translate why we're doing this and how it relates to your team and how you own it. You're a part of it. You're all a cog in a big machine together, and you all have a common goal. You can't set the organization apart from yourself. You have to be a champion for that goal. And then that's on the flip side too. I am an advocate and a translator and a communicator, a conduit, if you will, for my team. I have that bedside clinical knowledge. I have that field knowledge. If something's not working, that's on me to get that feedback from my team and provide that back to the organization or provide that back to leadership. Because if I don't, then we're just going to keep banging our heads against the wall and trying to do something that doesn't work. And then your team's going to get burnt out and wonder why you're not advocating for them. So, that's a big piece of it. And then also setting a clear path to get there. It's great to have ideas, but ideas mean nothing unless you execute. And it's important that you have a clear pathway on how to get there. Milestones, goals along the way, and then your ultimate final goal of what you're trying to reach. And examining those along the way and having, team meetings and allowing people to provide feedback along the way of how maybe we can do something better at the next milestone or on the way to the next milestone. And then also celebrating each other. We often forget to do that. We forget to celebrate our wins. We don't often get wins. So it's extremely important to celebrate those wins and to celebrate your team. Any chance I get to celebrate my team and tell them they've done a great job and thank them, I do it. Even if it's, more than once or twice a day. Because, we forget that for the most days, we're facing challenges. And you may only get one win. You may only maybe not even get one win a day. You may not get one win a week. You may get one win every 2 weeks. So it's extremely important to celebrate that and realize, hey, you've done something great. You've made an impact, because that's what drives people. And without that, people get burnt out. And so that's really, to me, his message to me is really in those core 3 sort of examples of how to build a team and how to continue to drive teamwork and keep people engaged, even in tough times, like as if you were a Navy SEAL. I'm sure they face some really tough times. So it's extremely important to, know how to push through that, to keep them engaged, to keep them on track, so that ultimately you reach your goal and everybody comes out on the other end.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm just even more so excited to read the book. I'll probably, bookmark it on Amazon and jump on there after we get done with the show here. And, I think your kind of takeaway from the book really kind of shares, because as you said, in this role that you're in, you're the key operational executive for the region that you're in. So you have this responsibility to your team as kind of the culture champion, but you also have the responsibilities to your company as an executive within the company, and how you see yourself as that conduit in between the two. I think is just a great analogy there. But, Kyle, culture starts, I think with the relationships that we're building. As a leader, you have such a large span in terms of the responsibility and the team members that you're affecting and you're leading. What's your approach to building relationships as a leader?
It's a great question. It starts off with, getting out there and getting to their level. Getting to know the individual, building a mutual respect, understanding what drives them, and also, not being afraid to throw yourself in there and work alongside them. As an executive leader, you don't always have that opportunity. You can't always go in and start checking in patients, but, getting in there and really understanding, what their world is like. I'm talking about, clinic level staff, developing those relationships. It's not, it's getting out there and also getting to know them, learning their name, remembering their name, learning about their family, what matters most to them, and engaging them. I think that's really, what for me is really been key to me in developing relationships in the past, and also being available for them, being able to relate to them, having empathy, being understanding. I think that's a big part as well. Those are sort of the factors and some of the ways that I have developed relationships in the past. Just letting them know that you're there for them. That's a big part of it too. Is I'm here to drive the goals and the success of our division or our market or our region, but I'm also here as a resource to you so that you can do your job. And how can I do that? And really, you're not going to figure that out unless you start to really get in there and get to know them, and work alongside them and listen to them and know that they're being heard and engaged in that.
Have you been feeling unfulfilled? You want to be happy, but just continue to struggle. One of the best ways to experience joy is by caring for the homeless. A charity I've grown to love, Riverlight, food rescues 1 million meals per year for the needy in Chicago. Imagine how that makes you feel, knowing that you're helping feed children and veterans. To make a tax-deductible donation, visit riverlightchicago.org. Again, riverlightchicago.org. No one should go to bed hungry.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love how you shared the piece of like getting to know them and like the whole them, not just them at work, but also what about your family, your kids, stuff like that. Because I think that so many times and I think that, in the work that I'm in, talking to executives on a daily basis in executive search, I've actually seen a lot of kind of like transformation in this way. And that like there's kind of been like, I guess, the old school approach of like you draw the line between personal and professional and you don't have any intersection between the two. And, I don't care about their family. Are they doing the job? And,
Right.
that's just not the way to approach it. I think that an analogy that I've really like, kind of, I don't know if I came up with this or heard it. I think I came up with it, but I'll probably use it 100 different times, throughout this podcast series is that like, the difference, like a lot of people between personal and professional put up like the old approach is like the Great Wall of China is between the two, and the wind blows or whatever, nothing is intersecting between the personal and professional. But in reality, we have to recognize that it's more like a chain link fence. And you've got those big diamonds in the middle of your chain link fence, and there's going to be a lot of crossover. So you have to be able to understand both sides of it to be, the most effective leader that you can be.
Yeah, I love that analogy there, Jaden. That's great. It is a chain link fence because you have to have boundaries, right? And some people don't want to share, and that's fine. You set the boundaries, but it does go a long way for people when you remember those little tidbits about their family and you're there for them when they may be going through things and you support them through things. That goes a really long way. And we spend a lot of time at work. We spend more time at work than we do with our family. And like I said before, we face a lot of challenges, especially in this day and age, especially in healthcare. So it's essential for people to feel cared about. I want my teams to feel that way. I want them to feel cared for. I want them to feel noticed.
Yeah. So you've, recently made a transition to Great Expressions, Kyle. Prior to that, you were with Concentra for, a while, and prior to that, with the medical group. But want to kind of hear, as culture is just so important to you as a leader. Can you kind of tell me about a time, and for you might not be as recent, or might not be as far out, it might be more recent than others, but that you've had to adapt to a culture when entering a new position, and maybe some of the specific challenges that you've faced in doing so?
Yeah, absolutely. I spent a lot of my time working in the Midwest and in the East Coast, especially prior to 2017. In 2017, I relocated to Seattle to work for a California-based organization And while this may seem crazy and I didn't believe it at first, there is definitely regional differences in how fast people move and how people communicate and work together. Not necessarily that a slower pace is not as good as a faster pace or a faster pace is preferred. It's just there is a difference. And I had, I was younger in my career, and this was something I had to learn. I was used to that faster pace, more direct communication, which I found seemed to be pretty off-putting to some of the individuals that I was working with now in Seattle. And so I had to quickly learn that this company's culture and the regional culture called for more of a sit-down discussion with a softer approach. I had actually, I hate saying this, I had made somebody cry in my first week unintentionally. I consider myself to be a pretty approachable and nice person. So I definitely had to adjust. And it wasn't overnight. But I also had to adjust to the fact that business moved a bit slower, which was a big challenge for me at first. I'm used to, okay, we have a problem, let's fix it. We have a goal, let's get to it. Just a much faster paced environment. But over time, I ultimately sort of shifted and transitioned into more of a hybrid model, which is where I am at today, where, not everything has to be done right now. The conversations don't always have to be, and this is a lot of Jaden where I picked up sort of my chain link fence approach too, is it doesn't always have to be just, okay, we're here to talk about business, let's talk about business. It can be, relating, catch up at first, a little bit more of an inclusive conversation to the individuals, and then also, eventually discuss business. It just creates a softer environment and an environment that people are more comfortable in, because you just never know what kind of culture they're coming from. And so, that was an adjustment for me, but I eventually adjusted it, and I hope it didn't take too long. It didn't feel like it took too long, but really I've kind of carried that into my sort of approach now, where I'm really sort of a hybrid model of, okay, how is that building that relationship, that relating, that coming back together and catching up, and then, okay, well, let's transition into more of a business conversation, and okay, instead of how quickly can we get it done, what is a realistic approach to this, and what is a realistic timeline, so that we're not pushing ourselves to something that is just not attainable.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That totally, like that sounds like a challenge, just going from like the go. And, it's kind of funny because you think of, like, anytime I think of the West Coast, I immediately think of LA. And to me, LA is go, right? So like, it's kind of, like hearing that, some places it's just a little slower pace and you got to move a little slower. That to me, I feel like would be definitely a frustration to have to work through. And I think that you shared that as well, of just like, when you have that mentality of like the go get it done type mentality, to like have roadblocks in between. It's like, can't we just run these over? Like, what are we doing? But kind of learning the virtue and the the value of patience, and knowing that the good will come as long as you're patient and persistent with it.
Right. Yeah. And that definitely, I was communicating here, or they were communicating here, and you're not meeting,
Right.
And so it was really important. I actually was told by somebody, hey, you're too East Coast. It's like, I'm from Chicago. Like, I'm not even from the East Coast. But so that was when I was like, okay, I step back and kind of reevaluate this. And so, it was a bit of a challenge, but really it was more of a learning experience. And I took that adjustment and really kind of I still kind of roll with it. It's really, like I said, it's a part of how I communicate, how I approach situations now. It's that learning as a young leader. You're always learning. I'm always learning now. So.
Oh yeah. Always looking at, when we think that we're, we know it all, that's when we, get shown very quickly that we don't. So always looking, for those opportunities to learn. So want to kind of jump, Kyle, I guess, when thinking about culture and team building, I think the first step is really that recruiting and hiring and kind of like onboarding piece. That's really where you're setting the foundation for that culture that you're searching for. As a leader, want to kind of hear maybe if you have an example. I know that sometimes with, hiring decisions, you have, 4 to 5 different stakeholders, within a hiring process. And you can be really sold on a candidate and maybe someone else isn't. And like either bringing that person on board, overruling them, or going another direction can kind of shape, the culture that you have on your team and within the organization as well. Can you tell me about a time where maybe you were sold on a candidate and other stakeholders weren't, or vice versa, where so many people were sold and you're like, hold on a minute, and kind of how you address that discrepancy?
Absolutely. So when I had joined Concentra, there was already an established regional team that were my counterparts. And they had been there for some years. So I was really the newbie, the new eyes coming in. And there was an associate director at one of our locations that had some problems. The individual had some work problems and had some personal problems that had kind of bled into the workplace. But when I met this individual and sat down with them, I immediately realized that this person is hungry. They have the ability to grow, and they want to grow, and they had ambition. They made some young mistakes, but, like I said, people make mistakes, and you can't, people shouldn't be just judged by the mistakes they've made. It's how you adjust and respond. And this individual was really trying to make changes and really working hard. And I saw that immediately. The feedback that I received from my team was, what they had experienced, what they had known of this person. And so a position came up for a director role for the location that this individual was in. And, for me, my immediate thought was, okay, well, let's give this individual a chance. Let's give them a chance and let's set them up for success, and let's grow and mentor and develop this individual because they have the organizational knowledge. They had a deep understanding of that particular location. They had the relationships already built with the physicians and staff. And, they just really knew the business really, really, really well. They just kind of had hit themselves in the knee and they were having a bit of trouble getting back up. So, of course, I brought this to the team and they were like, what are you thinking? This is what's happened. We don't know if they can bounce back from this, and we're just not sure. And so, I put together sort of the notes from my meetings with this individual, and where I had set goals for this individual, or this individual had set goals for themselves to show here was the goal that was put in front of them, and here's what they did. And time after time, I was able to show that this individual had been given a plan, given a goal, and they had executed and improved or achieved a milestone or driven an initiative. Those things that individual had been doing had been so overshadowed, so covered up by the past experiences that nobody noticed them. Nobody, had noticed that, and it's not their fault. I was a fresh set of eyes. There's a lot to be said for a fresh set of eyes. So, after we had that discussion, their eyes kind of opened up to, okay, maybe this can work. We're still not sure, but maybe this can work. So my suggestion is, well, why don't we try this on an interim basis? Let's set this individual up for success. Let's give them an opportunity, and let's tell them exactly what we're doing. This is an interim basis. This is a chance for you to prove yourself. It's all on you. We'll give you the resources. I'll be here to help you along the way, but this is up to you. And we went into it with that compromise. And the individual ended up becoming a champion, ended up excelling, drove the center, led the center to heights that we hadn't seen before, to great, some really great successes despite a lot of challenges. And that individual ended up becoming an overall regional director for the market at the time. So, that was coming in as new and having to sort of argue my point and advocate for this individual was not easy. But it turned out to be successful and had nothing to do with me at all. It had to do with the individual adjusting, learning from their mistakes, and responding in the right way.
Wow, that's awesome. Kudos, kudos to that individual, but kudos to you as a leader for just for recognizing and kind of enabling that success and that track record that he was then able, to accomplish. I think that, as a leader, I can speak personally to that just being the most fulfilling part of the job is like when you can develop and enable and support and coach, coach people up and help them, because you're not just impacting that individual, but, just the impact that, in your world, on the patients, but then also the families of those patients, the family of that individual. There's just such a much larger impact that's had, versus just that singular person. And that's just such an exciting and motivating and rewarding part of, being in that leadership capacity.
Absolutely.
So when, kind of talking about like, retention and, development, what are some, I guess, like what are some tidbits of advice that you share? You've grown in your career, in a VP level role where now you have, director level managers, reporting to you, who then have, managers reporting to them. What's the advice in developing those leaders underneath you? How do you kind of push them to develop the leaders underneath them?
Well, the first is being consistent with your expectations, being consistent with how you communicate, showing up. I think that is one of the biggest things that you really need to focus on as a leader. If you show up and you act as that example and you're consistent in your follow through, for your expectations or for the goals that you expect or the results that you expect, they will catch on to that and they will see that this is how it's done, and they will carry that. Also, with that, being available is super important. Being there for them, picking up the phone when they call, but also challenging them to find solutions and execute on their own. Giving them a level of autonomy is extremely important. If I just micromanage all the time, they're not going to know how to do their job. They're going to feel like they are bulking all the time. They're going to do something, they're going to stop. Like bulking in baseball sense. I think I'm using the right word, right, for pitchers.
Yep.
They're going to do that and say, oh, wait, well, is Kyle going to be okay with this? Seems going to be okay. Well, they're not executing then. They're not getting the job done then. And so they're really not developing as a leader. And so, that's important. It's being present, but not being present enough to where you're hovering over them. That's super important. The other is, providing them with development opportunities, with career opportunities, letting them see beyond what they're doing today. Not everybody is looking for that next step, but some people are. And some people aren't even really necessarily looking for the next step. They're just looking for something beyond what they're doing today to feel more fulfillment, to have more ownership. So it's getting them involved, allowing them to lead initiatives for the region, letting them own things, and drive those, those initiatives, or those KPIs or metrics, whatever it might be. So, that's super important to it in terms of development. And then also, again, I come back to this, but respect is huge. It all starts with me, and everything trickles down from how I respond and how, I react. So, and also how I treat people. So it's extremely important that people realize that this is yes, I am your leader, but this is an environment where I value you. This is an environment where I value your opinion and your knowledge. And I want to show you the respect that you have earned in this position, in your place in life, by listening to you, by engaging you for feedback, by including you. That's extremely important too, is to listen and to engage individuals, instead of just barking at them or just throwing stuff at them. That just doesn't bode well. People don't want to come. I mean, some people want to be told exactly what to do, and you figure those people out. But a lot of people want to have the ability to drive their own day. They want to have the ability to set their own pathway. I want to be able to help them get there, and I want them to do that for their people too. And so that's the example that I have to lead by, and that's how I have to carry myself, with them.
Awesome. And so, Kyle, you have, provided some just absolutely wonderful tips for team building on today's episode. If anybody in our audience is inspired by what you've shared, how can people reach out to you?
So they can, contact me via LinkedIn. I'm there on LinkedIn, Kyle Kingston, Great Expressions Dental Centers, or they can contact me directly through my work email, which is kyle.kingston@greatexpressions.com.
Awesome. And we will include that in the show notes as well, so that the audience has access to that. Kyle, just want to say thank you so much for being a guest, and the first guest on the Tips for Team Building podcast, where our mission is to inspire and propel others along in their leadership journeys. Enjoyed the opportunity to reconnect. Always a pleasure to chat with you, and I look forward to continuing the dialogue.
Well, thanks again for having me, Jaden, and I'm honored to be the first, and it was a pleasure talking with you today.
Thanks for tuning in to the Tips for Team Building podcast, where we propel others along in their leadership journeys. If you enjoyed the show, would you please subscribe and leave a review wherever you listened? You can also visit www.spiritmco.com to find out more about how Spirit Consulting inspires virtuous leadership. We'll see you next time.